The champagne bubbles rose like tiny lies in crystal glasses, each one catching the harsh fluorescent light of the corporate conference room. I stood at the makeshift bar, watching my colleagues pretend to enjoy themselves at yet another mandatory holiday party. The fake cheer hung thick in the air, mixed with the scent of cheap catering and expensive perfume. "Ladies and gentlemen," my wife Hazel's voice cut through the chatter like a knife through butter. She had commandeered the microphone from the DJ, her perfect smile gleaming under the spotlights. "I have some wonderful news to share with all of you tonight." I paused, my plastic cup of wine halfway to my lips. This wasn't planned. Hazel never did anything without planning it down to the last detail. Her marketing background had trained her to control every narrative, every moment, every reaction. "Nathan and I are expecting our first child." The room erupted in applause and cheers. I felt my face arrange itself into what I hoped looked like surprised joy, though inside I was genuinely shocked. We'd been trying for 2 years, going through the motions of fertility treatments and specialist appointments. The timing seemed miraculous. But then I noticed him. Wes Farrow, Hazel's boss and the company's CEO, had gone completely pale. Not the pale of surprise or excitement, but the pale of someone who'd just seen a ghost, or maybe someone who'd just become one. His wife, Mina Corin, stood beside him in her elegant black dress, her sharp lawyer's eyes following her husband's stare directly to my wife. I watched recognition dawn across her features like a sunrise nobody wanted to see. The pieces clicked together in my mind with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The late nights at the office, the sudden interest in weekend team-building exercises, the way Hazel had started dressing differently, carrying herself differently, smiling differently. Mina's gaze found mine across the crowded room. Her expression was cold, calculating, and somehow sympathetic all at once. She raised her wine glass in a mock toast, then mouthed a single word: "Tomorrow." The party continued around us, but I felt like I was watching it through glass. Colleagues approached to congratulate me, their voices sounding distant and hollow. Hazel basked in the attention, accepting hugs and well wishes with the grace of a woman who'd orchestrated the entire performance. "Isn't it wonderful?" Jade Marin, Hazel's best friend, appeared at my elbow with her characteristic fake enthusiasm. "Such a miracle, after all the struggles you two have been through." Jade's smile was too bright, her eyes too knowing. She'd been Hazel's constant companion during those mysterious girls' weekends and shopping trips that seemed to multiply over the past year. Now I wondered exactly what kind of support she'd been providing. "Yes," I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Quite miraculous." As the evening wound down, I helped Hazel gather her things. She was glowing, radiant with what I'd assumed was maternal joy, but now recognized as something else entirely. Victory, perhaps. Or relief. "Wasn't that perfect?" she whispered as we walked to the parking garage. "Everyone was so happy for us." "Perfect," I echoed, thinking of Wes's pale face and Mina's knowing stare. We drove home in comfortable silence, Hazel humming softly to herself. I focused on the road, my mind racing through months of small details I'd dismissed or ignored. The new lingerie I'd found in the laundry, the way she'd started working out more intensely, the sudden interest in ovulation tracking apps on her phone. At home, Hazel went straight to bed, claiming exhaustion. I sat in my workshop in the basement, surrounded by the computer equipment and electronics that comprised my IT consulting business. The familiar hum of servers and cooling fans usually calmed me, but tonight they sounded like whispers of conspiracy. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m., Brewster's on Main Street. We need to discuss our mutual problem. M." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it, but I'd already memorized every word. Upstairs, I could hear Hazel moving around in our bedroom, probably updating her social media with the happy news. I wondered how many people already knew about her pregnancy. I wondered how many of them knew more about it than I did. The workshop felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with the weight of unspoken truths. I'd built this space as my sanctuary, my place to think and create and solve problems. Now I had the biggest problem of my life to solve, and all my technical expertise felt useless against the analog betrayal happening upstairs. I pulled up the security system I'd installed throughout our house, ostensibly for protection, but really because I enjoyed the technical challenge. The cameras in the common areas, the motion sensors, the automated logs of when doors opened and closed. I'd never thought to use them for surveillance of my own wife. But now, as I scrolled through weeks of data, patterns emerged. Hazel leaving the house at unusual times, returning with different energy, different expressions. The system had been faithfully recording the evidence of my marriage's dissolution, and I'd been too trusting to notice. My phone buzzed again, This time it was Hazel texting from upstairs. Can't sleep, too excited about the baby. Love you. I typed back, love you too. Get some rest. The lie came easily. Muscle memory from months of maintaining a facade I hadn't even known I was building. But now the performance felt deliberate, strategic. If Hazel could play games, so could I. I spent the rest of the night in the workshop, not sleeping, not really thinking, just existing in the space between my old life and whatever came next. The servers hummed their electronic lullabies, and I listened to my wife moving around upstairs, probably planning her next move in a game I was just beginning to understand. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would meet with Mina Koren, I would listen to what she had to say, and then I would decide how to respond to the news that my wife was carrying another man's child. The sun rose over our suburban neighborhood, painting everything in deceptively warm colors. From my basement window, I could see neighbors starting their daily routines, walking dogs and retrieving newspapers, living their simple, honest lives. I envied them their ignorance. Brewster's coffee shop occupied a corner building on Main Street, its brick facade and hand-painted sign giving it the kind of authentic charm that attracted both locals and the occasional tourist. I arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a table in the back corner where I could see the entrance and most of the interior. Mina Koren walked in precisely at 10 o'clock, her punctuality as sharp as her tailored coat. She spotted me immediately, her lawyer's eyes scanning the room with professional efficiency before she approached my table. Nathan, she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike. Thank you for coming. Mina. I gestured to the chair across from me. I have to admit, I'm curious about this mutual problem you mentioned. She settled into her seat with elegant precision, removing her gloves and placing them neatly beside her purse. A server approached, and Mina ordered black coffee. I already had mine, though it had grown cold while I waited. Let me be direct, Mina said once we were alone. My husband has been having an affair with your wife for approximately 8 months. Last night's announcement was as much a surprise to him as it was to you, though probably for different reasons. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd suspected them. Hearing them spoken aloud by someone else made them real in a way my private suspicions hadn't. You seem very certain, I managed. I'm a lawyer, Nathan. I don't make accusations without evidence. She reached into her purse and withdrew a manila envelope. Jade Marin has been facilitating their meetings. She provided apartment keys, created alibis, and arranged those convenient girls' weekends that gave your wife cover for hotel visits with my husband. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, hotel receipts, and what looked like copies of text messages. The evidence was damning and thorough. How long have you known? I asked. I suspected for months. Wes isn't as clever as he thinks he is. The confirmation came 3 weeks ago when I hired a private investigator. Mina's voice remained steady, professional. I was preparing for a strategic divorce when your wife's announcement changed the situation. I flipped through the photographs, each one a small knife twist in my chest. Hazel and Wes entering hotels, sharing intimate dinners, walking hand in hand through parking lots. They looked happy together, carefree in a way Hazel and I hadn't been in years. What do you want from me? I asked. Cooperation. Wes's employment contract contains a morality clause that voids his severance package and stock options if he's terminated for workplace relationships. Your wife's pregnancy gives me leverage I didn't have before. And what do I get out of this partnership? Mina's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Justice, and a chance to control the narrative before your wife spins this situation to her advantage. She was right about that. Hazel's marketing background made her excellent at managing public perception. I could already imagine the story she'd craft. The devoted wife whose husband couldn't handle her success, the vulnerable pregnant woman forced to choose between her career and her marriage. There's more, Mina continued. She pulled out another folder, this one thicker. Nombaud building security footage from Wes's office. My investigator obtained it through legal channels. The photos showed Hazel and Wes in various compromising locations throughout the office building. Supply closets, executive bathrooms, stairwells. The timestamps covered 8 months, matching periods when Hazel had claimed to be working late on important projects. Of 47 instances, Mina said. All documented, all time-stamped, all admissible in court. I stared at the evidence of my wife's betrayal, feeling something cold and hard settling in my chest. Not anger exactly, but something more calculating, more strategic. What's your plan? I asked. First, we need to establish paternity. The timing of the pregnancy suggests the child is Wes's, but we need medical confirmation. Second, we document the financial implications. Has your wife had access to your accounts? Any unusual transfers or expenditures? I thought about our joint savings, the trust fund my father had left for future grandchildren, the various investments we'd made together. Hazel had access to all of it. I'll need to check, I said. But yes, she has access to most of our finances. Check tonight. Look for anything unusual, especially large transfers or new accounts. Mina finished her coffee and began gathering her things. We'll meet again tomorrow. Same time, same place. What about Jade? I asked. If she's been helping them. Leave Jade to me. I have plans for her. There was something in Mina's tone that made me glad we were allies rather than enemies. She stood to leave, then paused. Nathan, I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This is about consequences. Your wife and my husband made choices, and now they need to face the results of those choices. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, studying the evidence and thinking about consequences. Hazel had been planning this for months, maybe longer. The affair, the pregnancy, probably the eventual divorce. She'd been playing chess while I was playing checkers. But now I knew the rules of her game, and I had an ally who was better at playing it than either of us. I drove home through familiar suburban streets that looked different now, like I was seeing them through new eyes. The houses seemed smaller, the lawns less perfect. The whole neighborhood somehow diminished by the knowledge of what could happen behind closed doors. Hazel's car wasn't in the driveway. A note on the kitchen counter explained she'd gone shopping for maternity clothes with Jade. The timing was perfect for what I needed to do. In my workshop, I pulled up our financial records on my secure computer. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the past 6 months, Hazel had transferred $125,000 from my father's trust fund into a new brokerage account. The account listed both her and Wes as authorized users. She hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been stealing from our future children to fund her new life with her lover. I printed everything, organized it into folders, and locked it all in my fireproof safe. Then I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Hendricks, who'd handled my father's estate. Nathan, Patricia's voice was warm but professional. What can I do for you? I need to discuss some marital issues, I said. And I think I'm going to need a very good divorce attorney. I see. Can you come in tomorrow afternoon, say 2 o'clock? I'll be there. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet workshop and thought about the next few days. Hazel would come home full of excitement about baby clothes and nursery plans. She'd probably want to celebrate, maybe suggest dinner at our favorite restaurant. I would smile and play along, just as she'd been playing along for months. But now I was playing a different game entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from Hazel. Found the most adorable crib. Can't wait to show you. Home by 6. Love you. I typed back, can't wait to see it. Love you too. The lies were getting easier. Patricia Hendricks' law office occupied the top floor of a restored Victorian house downtown, its high ceilings and original hardwood floors giving it an air of established respectability. I'd been here before when settling my father's estate, but today the familiar surroundings felt different, charged with the electricity of impending conflict. Show me what you have, Patricia said, gesturing to the folders I'd brought. I spread the evidence across her mahogany desk. Mina's photographs, the security footage stills, the financial records showing the trust fund transfers. Patricia examined each document with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen every variation of human betrayal. This is very thorough, she said finally. Your wife's friend provided all of this? Wes Farrow's wife. She hired a private investigator. Smart woman, and you're certain about the timeline? The pregnancy announcement came after the affair began? According to the evidence, yes. 8 months of documented meetings, and Hazel's only been pregnant for about 6 weeks. Patricia made notes on a legal pad, her pen scratching across the paper with sharp, decisive strokes. The financial transfers are problematic for her. Using marital assets to fund an extramarital relationship creates significant liability. What are my options? Several. We can pursue divorce on grounds of adultery, which in this state affects property division and spousal support. The financial misconduct gives us additional leverage, and if the child isn't yours... It's not, I said with certainty I hadn't felt until that moment. Then we have abandonment of marital duties, fraud, and potentially criminal charges for the financial transfers. Patricia leaned back in her chair. But Nathan, I need to ask, what do you want out of this? Revenge or resolution? I want justice, and I want to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. Fair enough. Here's what we're going to do. Patricia outlined a strategy that was both elegant and ruthless. First, we'd quietly secure our evidence and protect my assets. Then we'd coordinate with Mina's divorce proceedings to maximize pressure on both Wes and Hazel. Finally, we'd control the timing of revelations to prevent Hazel from crafting her preferred narrative. The key is patience, Patricia warned. Your wife is clearly skilled at manipulation. If we move too quickly, she'll adapt and potentially destroy evidence or create complications. I left the law office with a clear plan and a strange sense of calm. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking action rather than simply reacting to events. My next stop was the office building where Hazel worked. I'd visited before for company events, but today I was here for reconnaissance. The security guard at the front desk recognized me. "Hey, Mr. Trevon, here to see the missus?" "Actually, I was hoping to speak with you about the security system," I said. "I'm an IT consultant, and I'm curious about your setup." Tom Wilson, according to his name tag, was happy to discuss the building's security infrastructure. He was particularly proud of the camera coverage and digital storage system. "We keep everything for a year," he said. "Management's very strict about that. You never know when you might need to review something." "That's very thorough. I don't suppose you'd be willing to show me how it works?" "Okay, professional curiosity." Tom glanced around the empty lobby, then shrugged. "Sure, why not? Always nice to talk shop with someone who understands the technical side." The security office was a cramped space filled with monitors and recording equipment. Tom walked me through the system, explaining camera locations and recording schedules. I made mental notes about blind spots and coverage areas. "Must be interesting work," I said. "Do you ever see anything unusual?" Tom's expression became carefully neutral. "We see all kinds of things, but we're professionals. We keep what we see to ourselves unless there's a legal reason not to." "Of course. I imagine you have protocols for that." "Subpoenas, court orders, that kind of thing. Then we cooperate fully with law enforcement or legal proceedings." I thanked Tom for the tour and left him my business card. "In case you ever need IT consulting," I said. He pocketed the card with a knowing look. "I'll keep that in mind, Mr. Trevon." That evening, Hazel was full of energy and excitement. She'd bought maternity clothes, pregnancy books, and a collection of baby items that she spread across our living room like trophies. "Look at this," she said, holding up a tiny outfit. "Isn't it precious? I can't believe we're actually going to have a baby." I made appropriate sounds of appreciation while studying her face. She seemed genuinely happy, which made her betrayal somehow worse. This wasn't a woman torn between two lives. This was someone who'd made her choice and was comfortable with the deception required to maintain it. "Have you thought about telling your mother?" I asked. "I called her this afternoon. She's thrilled, of course. She wants to come visit next weekend to start planning the nursery." Veda Talrin, Hazel's mother, was a formidable woman who'd never quite approved of me. She'd made it clear from the beginning that she thought her daughter could have done better. I wondered how she'd react to learning about Wes. "That sounds nice," I said. "It'll be good to have family involved." Hazel curled up next to me on the couch, her head on my shoulder. "I'm so happy, Nathan. I know we've had some rough patches, but this feels like a new beginning for us." I stroked her hair, thinking about the photographs in Mina's envelope. "Yes," I said, "a new beginning." That night, after Hazel fell asleep, I returned to my workshop and began preparing for what came next. I encrypted copies of all our evidence and stored them in multiple secure locations. I documented our financial accounts and began the process of protecting assets that were solely mine. Most importantly, I started planning how to control the narrative when the truth finally came out. Hazel might be skilled at marketing, but I understood systems and information flow. When the time came, I'd make sure the right people heard the right story at the right time. My phone buzzed with a text from Mina. "Progress on our mutual project. Meet tomorrow, usual place, usual time." I typed back, "Confirmed. Have updates to share as well." The alliance was working. Soon, Hazel and Wes would discover that their carefully constructed deception had some serious structural flaws. I turned off the workshop lights and headed upstairs, where my wife slept peacefully, dreaming of her new life with another man's child. In a few hours, she'd wake up and continue the performance of being a loving, faithful wife. But the audience was getting smaller every day. The next morning brought the first crack in Hazel's perfect facade. I was in the kitchen making coffee when she rushed in, her phone pressed to her ear and her face tight with concern. "What do you mean, an investigation?" she was saying. "Who authorized that?" I continued preparing breakfast, listening to her side of the conversation while pretending to focus on scrambling eggs. "No, I don't think that's necessary. Can't you just—" "Yes, I understand. Fine. I'll be there in an hour." She hung up and stood staring at her phone, her knuckles white where she gripped it. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Just some workplace drama. HR wants to meet with me about something." She forced a smile. "Probably just routine paperwork related to the pregnancy announcement." I nodded sympathetically while inwardly celebrating. Mina was moving faster than expected, and Hazel was already feeling the pressure. I'm sure it's nothing serious, I said. Want some breakfast before you go? No, I should get ready. Rain check? After Hazel left, I called Mina from my workshop. She answered on the first ring. The HR investigation is moving quickly, she said without preamble. I filed a formal complaint yesterday about workplace relationships affecting the professional environment. They have to follow protocol. How much do they know? Enough to ask uncomfortable questions. And I've made it clear that I have documentation if they need it. There was satisfaction in Mina's voice. Your wife is about to discover that actions have consequences. What about Wes? He's been trying to reach me since yesterday. I'm not taking his calls. Mina paused. How are you handling things at home? Carefully. Hazel doesn't suspect I know anything yet, but she's getting nervous about something. Good. Keep playing the supportive husband for now. The longer she thinks she's in control, the more mistakes she'll make. That afternoon, I drove to Jade Marin's apartment complex, a trendy development designed to attract young professionals with more money than sense. Jade lived on the 3rd floor in a unit that probably cost more than most people's mortgages. I'd brought a bottle of wine and a story about wanting to thank her for being such a good friend to Hazel during our fertility struggles. Jade bought it completely, inviting me in with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested she enjoyed being the center of attention. Hazel is so lucky to have you, she gushed, leading me into her pristine living room. Not every husband would be so understanding about the time and emotional support she's needed. She's mentioned how much your friendship means to her, I said, accepting a glass of the wine I'd brought, especially during those difficult weekends when she needed space to process everything. Jade's smile faltered slightly. The weekends? You know, when she'd stay at your place or you'd go away together. She said it really helped her cope with the stress of the treatments. Oh, right, yes, those weekends. Jade took a large gulp of wine. We all need our support systems. I let the conversation drift to other topics, but I could see Jade's mind working, trying to figure out exactly what I knew and how much trouble she might be in. By the time I left, she was visibly nervous. Give my best to Hazel, she said at the door. And congratulations again on the pregnancy. Such wonderful news. Thank you. I'm sure we'll all be seeing a lot more of each other now that we're going to be parents. The look on Jade's face suggested that prospect didn't fill her with joy. That evening, Hazel came home later than usual, her earlier enthusiasm replaced by a tense energy that filled our house like static electricity. How was your day? I asked. Fine. Just some administrative stuff at work. She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen counter, not quite looking at me. How was yours? Quiet. I stopped by to see Jade, actually. Wanted to thank her for being such a good friend during our rough patch. Hazel's hand tightened on her glass. You saw Jade? Just for a few minutes. She seemed a bit distracted. Everything okay with her? I'm sure she's fine. She's been stressed about work lately. But I could see the wheels turning in Hazel's mind, calculating what Jade might have said and whether any damage had been done. The paranoia was setting in, just as Mina had predicted. My phone rang, interrupting the tension. It was Patricia Hendricks. Nathan, we need to meet tomorrow morning. Something's come up that requires immediate attention. What kind of something? The kind we should discuss in person. Can you be here at 9? I'll be there. After I hung up, Hazel was watching me with sharp attention. Everything okay? Just business stuff. Nothing important. But we both knew that wasn't true. The careful balance of our deception was starting to shift, and neither of us was quite sure how to maintain our performance. That night, I lay awake listening to Hazel toss and turn beside me. Whatever had happened at her HR meeting had shaken her confidence, and my visit to Jade had added another layer of uncertainty. The game was accelerating, and soon we'd all have to stop pretending we didn't know what was really happening. Around midnight, I heard Hazel get up and go downstairs. Through the bedroom window, I could see the glow of her phone screen in the backyard. She was making a call, probably to either Wes or Jade, trying to coordinate their stories and figure out how much danger they were in. I smiled in the darkness. Let them scramble. Let them worry. Let them discover what it felt like to have their carefully constructed world start crumbling around them. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new pressure, new cracks in their facade. And I'd be ready for all of it. The hunter had become the hunted, and they were just beginning to understand how thoroughly the tables had turned. Patricia's office felt different at 9 in the morning, the autumn sunlight streaming through tall windows and casting long shadows across her desk. She had coffee waiting and a stack of new documents that looked ominous. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Or rather, your wife has created a problem that's about to become very public. She slid a printout across the desk. It was a social media post from Hazel's account, timestamped at 11:47 p.m. the night before. After much soul-searching, I've decided to separate from my husband. This is an incredibly difficult time, especially with the pregnancy, but I need to prioritize my emotional well-being and that of my unborn child. Nathan has become increasingly controlling and unsupportive during what should be the happiest time of our lives. I ask for privacy and understanding as I navigate this challenging situation. I stared at the post, feeling a mixture of admiration and fury at Hazel's strategic thinking. She'd gotten ahead of the story, positioning herself as the victim and me as the villain. The post already had dozens of sympathetic comments from friends and colleagues. "She's good," I said. "She's desperate," Patricia corrected. This kind of preemptive strike usually means she knows something's coming and she's trying to control the narrative. The question is, what spooked her? I told Patricia about the HR investigation and my conversation with Jade. She listened with the focused attention of someone building a case. "Your wife is making mistakes now," Patricia said. "This post, for instance. She's created a public record of her claims about your behavior. When we present evidence of her affair and financial misconduct, it's going to look like projection and manipulation. What's our next move? We accelerate the timeline. I'm filing for divorce today, citing adultery and financial misconduct. We'll request immediate asset protection and demand a paternity test." Patricia's smile was sharp. "If she wants to play in public, we'll give her an audience." My phone had been buzzing constantly since I'd arrived at Patricia's office. Friends and family responding to Hazel's post, some offering support, others asking for my side of the story. I'd ignored them all, but now I saw a text from Mina that made me pause. "Emergency meeting. 1 hour. Coffee shop." I showed the message to Patricia. She nodded grimly. "Go. But be careful what you say. Assume everything is being recorded now." Mina was already waiting when I arrived at Brewster's, her usual composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled anger. She'd claimed our corner table and had what looked like legal documents spread in front of her. "Wes tried to fire me this morning," she said as soon as I sat down. "What?" "He called me into his office and accused me of creating a hostile work environment. Said my personal issues were affecting my professional judgment." Mina's laugh was bitter. "He actually thought he could intimidate me into backing down." "What did you do?" "I handed him these." She gestured to the documents. "Divorce papers, filed this morning. A formal complaint to the State Bar Association about his professional conduct, and a letter to the company's board of directors detailing his violation of the morality clause in his employment contract." I whistled softly. "You've been busy." "I'm just getting started. By the end of the day, Wes Farrow is going to understand exactly what it costs to underestimate a lawyer." She gathered the papers and slid them into her briefcase. "How are things on your end?" I told her about Hazel's social media post and Patricia's response. Mina nodded approvingly. "Good. She's panicking, which means she's going to make more mistakes. The key now is to stay ahead of her narrative." "Any word on the HR investigation?" "They're interviewing everyone who worked closely with Hazel and Wes. Jade Marin is being questioned this afternoon." Mina's smile was predatory. "I have a feeling that conversation is going to be very enlightening." We parted ways with plans to meet again the following day. The coordination between our two divorce proceedings was creating pressure that neither Wes nor Hazel had anticipated. I spent the afternoon in my workshop, monitoring the digital fallout from Hazel's announcement. Her post had been shared dozens of times, generating a wave of sympathy and support that would have been touching if it weren't built on lies. But I also noticed something interesting in the comments. Several of Hazel's colleagues from work were notably absent from the supportive chorus. People who usually responded to her posts immediately were staying silent. Word of the HR investigation was spreading, and some people were smart enough to avoid taking sides until they knew more facts. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Tom Wilson, the security guard from Hazel's building. "Mr. Trevon, you said to call if anything interesting came up." "What's happening, Tom?" "Well, there's been some unusual activity today. HR folks going through video archives, lots of closed-door meetings, and that friend of your wife's, the blonde one, she left about an hour ago looking pretty upset." "Jade Marin?" "That's the one. Came out of the HR office like someone had set her on fire. Thought you might want to know." "Thanks, Tom. I appreciate the heads up." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and considered the implications. If Jade had cracked under questioning, she might have revealed details about her role in facilitating the affair. That would give both Mina and me additional leverage in our respective divorce proceedings. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tonight. 8 p.m. Riverside Park, North Parking Lot. Come alone. Jay." Jade was reaching out, probably hoping to do damage control or negotiate some kind of arrangement. I forwarded the message to both Patricia and Mina, then typed back, "I'll be there." The park was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few joggers and dog walkers taking advantage of the mild evening. Jade's car was parked under a streetlight, and I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat. She got out when she saw me approach. "Nathan, thank God you came." She looked terrible, her usual polished appearance replaced by smeared makeup and wrinkled clothes. "We need to figure this out before everything gets worse." "Figure what out, Jade?" "You know what? The whole situation with Hazel and Wes. I never meant for it to get this complicated." I let the silence stretch between us, waiting for her to fill it with more admissions. "Look, I helped them meet a few times, okay? But I didn't know she was going to get pregnant. I didn't know it would turn into this whole thing." "A few times?" "Maybe more than a few. But Nathan, you have to understand, Hazel was miserable. She felt trapped, like her life wasn't going anywhere. Wes made her feel alive again. So you decided to help her commit adultery." "I decided to help my friend find happiness." Jade's voice rose defensively. "You two weren't exactly setting the world on fire with your romance." "And the money? Did you help her find happiness by stealing from our accounts?" Jade's face went pale. "What money?" "The $125,000 she transferred to an account with Wes's name on it." "I don't know anything about that." But her expression suggested she was starting to understand the scope of the problem. "Nathan, listen, maybe we can work something out. I'll tell HR that I misunderstood their questions, that I exaggerated the extent of my involvement. In exchange for what?" "Your promise that you won't drag me into the divorce proceedings. I can't afford to get caught up in a legal battle." I studied her face in the streetlight, seeing desperation and calculation in equal measure. Jade had helped destroy my marriage, and now she wanted me to help protect her from the consequences. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Nathan, please. I made a mistake, but I was just trying to be a good friend." "Good friends don't help their friends commit fraud, Jade. They don't facilitate deception and betrayal. They don't help steal money from trust funds intended for children." I walked back to my car, leaving her standing in the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see her making a phone call, probably to Hazel or Wes, reporting on our conversation and trying to coordinate their next move. But it was too late for coordination. The investigation was underway, the legal proceedings had begun, and the truth was starting to emerge despite their best efforts to contain it. By the time I got home, Hazel's car was in the driveway, but the house was dark, except for a single light in our bedroom. I found her sitting on the bed, still fully dressed, staring at her phone. "We need to talk," she said, without looking up. "Yes," I agreed. "We do." The performance was finally over. Now came the real conversation we should have had months ago. Hazel set her phone aside and looked at me with eyes that held no trace of the loving wife she'd been pretending to be. The mask was off, and what remained was calculating, desperate, and dangerous. "How long have you known?" she asked. "About the affair? About the pregnancy? About the money you stole?" I sat down in the chair across from our bed, maintaining distance between us. "Which particular betrayal are we discussing?" "Don't be clever, Nathan. It doesn't suit you." Apparently, a lot of things don't suit me. Trusting my wife, for instance, believing we were building a life together, thinking you actually wanted children with me. Hazel stood and began pacing, her nervous energy filling the room. "You don't understand. Things between us had been stagnant for years. We were just going through the motions. So you decided to go through different motions with your boss. Wes understands me in ways you never did. He sees my potential, my ambition. With him, I felt like the person I was meant to be." "The person you were meant to be is a thief and an adulterer?" "The money was an investment in our future. Wes and I were going to start our own company. You would have gotten it back eventually." I almost laughed at the casual way she rewrote history to make herself the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of betrayal. "Our future, Hazel? Or your future with him?" She stopped pacing and faced me directly. "I was going to tell you. After the baby was born, after things settled down, I was going to ask for a divorce." "How generous of you. And in the meantime, I was supposed to help raise another man's child while you planned your exit strategy." "The child could have been yours. The timing worked. Except it didn't. I've seen the medical records, Hazel. I know when you got pregnant, and I know it wasn't with me." For the first time, she looked genuinely surprised. "You've been investigating me?" "I've been protecting myself, something I should have started doing months ago." Hazel sat back down on the bed, her composure finally cracking. "What do you want, Nathan? Money? I'll pay back the trust fund. Do you want me to disappear? I can transfer to the West Coast office. I want you to face the consequences of your choices, all of them. And what about Wes? Are you going after him too? Wes is Mina's problem, though I suspect she's handling it quite effectively. Hazel's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it reflexively. Her face went white. What is it? I asked. She showed me the screen. It was a news alert from the local business journal. Prominent CEO terminated following internal investigation. I took the phone and read the brief article. Wes Farrow had been fired from his position effective immediately. The company cited violations of professional conduct policies but declined to provide specifics. The article mentioned that his termination voided his severance package and stock options. Mina works fast, I said, handing the phone back. Hazel stared at the screen, probably calculating how Wes's firing affected her own situation. Without his income and benefits, their planned future together looked significantly less attractive. This is all going to come out, isn't it? She said quietly. It already is coming out. The HR investigation, the divorce filings, the financial records. Did you really think you could keep this secret forever? I thought I had more time. I thought I could control how the story was told. Like you tried to control it with that social media post, making me the villain before anyone could hear the truth? Hazel had the grace to look ashamed, though I suspected it was more about getting caught than about what she'd done. I panicked. Jade said HR was asking questions, and I knew things were falling apart. Speaking of Jade, she tried to negotiate with me tonight, offered to change her story in exchange for staying out of the legal proceedings. What did you tell her? That good friends don't help their friends commit fraud. Hazel laughed bitterly. Jade was never a good friend. She was just someone who enjoyed being part of the drama. She encouraged the affair because it made her feel important. And you went along with it because it gave you what you wanted. Yes. The admission came out as barely a whisper. I wanted something different, something exciting, something that made me feel alive again. And now? Now I feel like everything is falling apart, and I don't know how to stop it. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of months of deception settling between us like a physical presence. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of suburban evening. Cars pulling into driveways, dogs barking, children being called in for dinner, life continuing as normal for everyone except us. What happens next? Hazel asked finally. You find somewhere else to stay tonight. Tomorrow we start the legal process. Divorce, asset division, paternity testing, all the things that should have been handled honestly from the beginning. And the baby? The baby deserves to know who his real father is, and Wes deserves to face his responsibilities, even if he's not in a position to provide the life you thought you were getting. Hazel began gathering clothes and personal items, moving with the mechanical efficiency of someone in shock. I watched her pack, thinking about all the dreams and plans we'd shared that were now just debris from a marriage that had been falling apart far longer than either of us had admitted. For what it's worth, she said as she closed her suitcase, I never meant to hurt you this badly. But you meant to hurt me some. I meant to leave you. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. She paused at the bedroom door, looking back at me with something that might have been regret. We could have been happy, Nathan, if things had been different. We could have been honest. That might have been enough. After she left, I sat alone in our bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had been built on increasingly shaky foundations. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and depositions and the messy business of untangling two lives that had been woven together with threads of deception. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. The performance was over, the truth was emerging, and whatever came next would at least be built on solid ground. My phone buzzed with a text from Mina. Wes fired. HR investigation complete. Full report tomorrow. Well done. I typed back. Hazel moved out tonight. The reckoning begins. Outside, the suburban evening continued its normal rhythm, but inside our house, everything had changed. The marriage was over, the lies were exposed, and the consequences were finally beginning to unfold. Justice, I thought, might actually be possible after all. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, its wood paneling and fluorescent lights giving it the atmosphere of a particularly serious conference room. I sat beside Patricia, watching as the judge reviewed the final divorce decree and custody arrangements. Across the room, Hazel sat with her attorney, looking tired and older than her years. The pregnancy was showing now, her condition making her situation more complicated and, in some ways, more tragic. Wes sat in the back row, his presence required for the paternity proceedings, but his involvement minimal. The court finds that the evidence clearly establishes adultery and financial misconduct, Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying the weight of legal authority. The defendant's transfer of marital assets to fund an extramarital relationship constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty. The financial settlement was everything Patricia had hoped for. Hazel would receive minimal spousal support, and the trust fund money would be returned with interest. More importantly, the court had established a clear record of her deception and betrayal. Regarding the minor child, the judge continued, paternity testing has established that Mr. Farrow is the biological father. Mr. Trevon has no legal obligations regarding child support or custody. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness at those words. Relief that I wouldn't be legally bound to support another man's child, but sadness for the child who would grow up in the wreckage of his parents' poor choices. After the hearing, I walked out into the crisp spring afternoon. Patricia had handled the legal proceedings with professional excellence, and Mina had become an unexpected friend through our shared experience of betrayal and recovery. "How are you feeling?" Patricia asked as we stood on the courthouse steps. "Free," I said, and meant it. Mina's divorce had been finalized 2 weeks earlier. Wes had lost his job, his family, and most of his assets. He was working at a much smaller company now, struggling to pay child support for his children with Mina and preparing for the additional financial burden of the child with Hazel. Jade had been fired from her job after the HR investigation revealed the extent of her involvement in facilitating the affair. She'd moved back to her parents' house in another state, her social media presence notably quieter than before. As for Hazel, she was living in a small apartment across town, working part-time and preparing for single motherhood. The glamorous life she'd envisioned with Wes had evaporated along with his career prospects. They were still together, technically, but the relationship bore little resemblance to the passionate affair that had destroyed 2 marriages. I drove home through familiar streets that felt different now, not because they'd changed, but because I had. The house seemed larger without Hazel's presence, quieter, but not lonely. I'd turned her former office into an expanded workshop, and the space hummed with the sound of servers and electronics that formed the backbone of my growing consulting business. The scandal had actually helped my professional reputation. Word had spread about how I'd handled the situation with dignity and strategic thinking, and several new clients had approached me specifically because they had heard about my character during the crisis. My phone buzzed with a text from Mina. "Dinner tomorrow? I'm buying," I typed back. "Sounds good. 7 o'clock?" Our friendship had surprised both of us. We'd been thrown together by circumstances, but we'd discovered a genuine compatibility based on shared values and mutual respect. We weren't dating, exactly, but we weren't not dating either. We were taking things slowly, building something real on the foundation of honesty that had been missing from our previous marriages. That evening, I sat in my workshop and reflected on the events of the past year. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been clarifying. I'd learned things about myself, about relationships, and about the importance of facing truth even when it was uncomfortable. Hazel had wanted excitement and passion, but she'd confused those things with deception and drama. Real excitement, I'd discovered, came from building something genuine with someone who shared your values. Real passion emerged from trust and honesty, not from the artificial intensity of forbidden relationships. The baby would be born in 3 months, a child who would grow up knowing the complicated truth of his origins. I felt sorry for him, but I also felt confident that he'd be better off with that truth than with the elaborate fiction his mother had originally planned. As for me, I was starting over at 42, but I was starting with hard-won wisdom about what mattered and what didn't. The house was quiet, my business was thriving, and my future felt full of possibilities that didn't require deception to achieve. I'd learned that revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about consequences. It wasn't about making people suffer. It was about making sure they faced the results of their choices. And sometimes, the best revenge was simply living well while others dealt with the chaos they'd created. The toast that had started everything had indeed burned down a house. The house of lies and deception that Hazel and Wes had built around their affair. But from those ashes, something better was emerging. Truth, justice, and the possibility of relationships built on solid ground. I turned off the workshop lights and headed upstairs, thinking about tomorrow's dinner with Mina and the slow, careful process of building something real. Outside, the suburban evening settled into its familiar rhythms, and for the first time in over a year, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The performance was over. A real life could finally begin.